Welcome back. Now we have the ability to attack, and we can't spam the attack anymore. If we attack just once, that's it. We can't attack again. I can spam the left mouse button, and we're not attacking anymore. And that's a problem. We need to be able to attack multiple times. So what I'd like to do is enable us to attack as soon as that attack animation is finished. And one way to do this is by the use of animation notifies. Let's go back and look in our animations folder and open our attack montage. And here in the attack montage, we have our two attack sections. And what we'd like is for something to happen at some point in the animation, specifically at the end of the animation. When we reach the end of the attack animation, I'd like to reset that action state back to unoccupied, and then we'll be able to attack again. Now, one way to do this is by the use of animation notifies, also known as anim notifies. Notice here in the montage editor, we have a notifies section. And under notifies, there's a bar labeled 1. And in this bar, we can add notifies by right-clicking, selecting Add Notify, and choosing New Notify. And if we select New Notify, we're prompted to choose a notify name. We can call this Attack End and hit Enter. And notice that the bar under Notifies labeled 1 has something that says Attack End, and we can click and move this around. We want this somewhere near the end of the montage section. And I can hold Control and mouse wheel to drag in and move this closer to the end if I want to. Now, you don't want to place it exactly at the end because then you're risking this notify being in the Attack 2 montage section. So you do want to make sure that it's somewhere before the end of the montage section. Now, as soon as Attack End was added to our montage section, we now have the ability to do something when this Attack End anim notify is reached when playing this animation section. We can access this from within the character's animation blueprint. Now, we're using multiple animation blueprints, but we're going to go into the main animation blueprint. Now, up here at the top, we see that we can go into different types of editors from here in the montage, and these editors are all tied together by the skeleton that they all share. So if I clicked on this one, when I hover over it, it says Skeletal Mesh. If I click on it, I go back to the Skeletal Mesh editor associated with Echo's skeleton. If I click on this one that looks like a skeleton, then I go back to the skeleton editor. The one with the running person is the montage. Now, this icon here, when I hover over it, says ABP Echo IK. That's because multiple animation blueprints are using the Echo skeleton, and it doesn't know which one I want to jump to, but I can click the three dots and select which one, for example, ABP Echo. That's our main animation blueprint. If I choose that, we'll jump to ABP Echo, and here in the event graph is where we can access an event that was generated as soon as we created that new notify, which we called Attack End. So if we right-click and search for Attack End, we'll see Event Anim Notify Attack End. This will be fired off as soon as we reach that notify in the animation montage section, and we can do something in response here, such as setting our action state back to unoccupied. And that's what we would like to do. So if we wanted to set that directly here in the event graph, that enum would need to be exposed to blueprints. You see, if we right-click and type /character, we can access that /character variable, which is a C++ variable, but we made it blueprint read-only, so we can access it here. And from the /character, we can access properties, but if we search for action state, we won't see it here because it's not exposed to blueprints. So let's take care of that. We'll jump back into our Visual Studio project, and here in /character, our action state enum is not exposed to the Unreal Engine reflection system, but we can expose it by giving it a U property. And if we want to be able to access and change this enum variable from blueprints, namely our animation blueprint, it needs to have the blueprint read write specifier. But this is a private variable, and as we know, we can't make a private variable blueprint read write unless we give it the meta specifier allow private access. So we can do that. We can place a comma and say meta equals, parentheses, allow private access equals, and in quotes, we put true. This will result in exposing this enum to Blueprints, but there's an issue. You see, we can't expose this to Blueprints because it's not a Blueprint type. If we go to character types where the eActionState enum is defined, it doesn't have a uenum macro with the Blueprint type specifier. So here's what happens if we save all and hop back into the editor and try to hot reload. We see that build failed. And if we look at the error message, it says /character.h line 47 error. Unrecognized type eActionState. Type must be a uClass, uStruct, or uenum, or global delegate. So we can't expose this enum to the reflection system if it doesn't have a uenum type. And further, we can't expose it to Blueprints if it doesn't say Blueprint type in the uenum. So we're going to copy this uenum from our eCharacterState and paste it right here just above eActionState. And now we can expose this to the reflection system because it's a uenum, and we can expose it to Blueprints because it's now capable of being a Blueprint type. Now, when we change variables like this, exposing them to Unreal Engine's reflection system, it's a good idea to go ahead and close down the editor, and doing a hard compile, I'm going to Control F5 to compile and launch the editor, as sometimes changing variables' reflection status can result in a crash when hot reloading from the editor. So that's something to be aware of. Now that we've recompiled, I'm going to click Open so I get my asset editors back, and here in ABP Echo, I'd like to do something in response to our attack end notify. Now I'd like to get my /character, and I could right-click and type /character and get that node here, or I can expose my inherited variables so they show up down here in the variables section. And again, to do that, I click on the gear icon and check Show Inherited Variables. Now my variables has a drop-down, and under /anim instance, there's my /character, that C++ variable that we expose to Blueprints. And now I can drag off of this and type ActionState, and I see getActionState and setActionState. Remember, we want to set ActionState back to unoccupied. So we're going to use setActionState, and there's a drop-down for the action state. And we can choose unoccupied or attacking. Those are the only two states in this enum. We're going to hook this up and set action state back to unoccupied and compile. And if we go ahead and playtest this, we can grab a weapon and attack, and I can spam the attack button, but I can't attack until we hit that anim notify, at which point our action state is set back to unoccupied and we can attack again. So this way, if we spam the attack button, we won't be able to attack again until we reach that notify. Now, I just played my second attack animation associated with my attack 2 section, but there is no anim notify in that section, so I still can't attack. So we can go back to the attack montage and place this attack end notify at the end of the attack 2 section as well. So I can right click over here, add notify, and this time I don't need to add a new notify as attack end already exists. And if we go to skeleton notifies, there's my attack end notify, and I can add it there. So now if I go back and try to play and attack multiple times, I can spam the attack button, and I won't attack until we reach the end of the attack montage. And this is great. Now that's one way to do this. We can access the /character variable and set a property on it directly in the animation blueprint. But sometimes you might want to handle these types of things in C++ directly. There might be other things you want to do on attack end, and those might involve C++ variables that are not exposed to blueprints, and you might not want to expose them to blueprints. Or you may just want to handle this in C++ to be as efficient as possible. If we want to have some C++ function called in response to an anim notify, we can make a blueprint callable function and handle this behavior in C++ instead. Now, the difference in performance is going to be negligible. Whether we set it here in the animation blueprint or in C++ is not really going to matter too much But if your convention is to do things in C++ for the most part, you can do it that way, and I'm going to show you how. So let's go ahead and remove these nodes and hop back into Visual Studio. And we'll make a blueprint callable function that we can call in response to the attack end notify. So here in /character, we'll make a protected section, and I'll put it just under play attack montage as it's related to that. It'll be a void function, and I'll simply call it attack end. And we'll give this a U function with blueprint callable. And now we can call this from blueprints. So let's go ahead and implement this function. And in this function, all we need to do is set our action state back to unoccupied. So we'll say action state equals action state unoccupied. And now we just need to call this function from our animation blueprint in response to our anim notify. So I'm going to click Save All. So with my editor closed down, I'm going to compile and launch from here. And opening my animation blueprint, I can once again get my /character, and from the /character, call attack end. Now, if you don't see attack end as an option, you'll need to close your editor down, compile from Visual Studio, and launch up again, and then you should see it. Now, a note on using the /character. Just like pointer variables in C++, it's a good idea to check our /character variable to make sure it's actually set at the time we call a function on it. Now, there's two ways to check to see if /character is valid. We can drag off of /character and type is valid. And there are two options here. The one with the question mark gives us a handy node that will only execute the isValid execution pin if the variable passed in is valid. If it's not set yet, then isValid will not execute. Instead, isNotValid will execute. Now, there were two isValid nodes that we could have chosen. The other one is a function. If we get it, we see that it's a blueprint pure function returning a Boolean that will be true if the object is valid and false otherwise. So, as usual, there are multiple ways to do things in Unreal Engine. On that note, there's also a third way, and that's to right-click on /character and convert this to a validated get. If we select that, convert to validated get, we get a validated get node. And this is sort of all of these techniques wrapped into one. We don't need an isValid node because this node will return the value of /character, and if it is a valid /character, then the isValid execution pin will be executed. So that's a way to get /character and check to see if it's valid all in one. Now we can compile and press play, and if we grab a weapon, we can attack and spam the attack button, and we won't keep attacking until the attack animation is finished, which is great. Now we are still sliding around while we're attacking, and we'll need to take care of that, and we'll get to that soon. Another issue I'd like to take care of is when we press play, if I click in the viewport, in fact, if I left click without a weapon in general, I will play the attack animation, and that's not something I'd like to do. I really only want to play the attack animation if we have a weapon equipped. Now that's an easy thing to prevent. If we go into our attack function, we're checking to see if our action state is unoccupied. But really, we should also check to see if we're unequipped as well. So what we could do is check our other enum called character state, which is how we know if we're unequipped or not. We could come in here into the attack function and place an AND here in the condition and check if character state is not equal to character state unequipped. So we're checking both of our enums here. We're checking to see if we're not unequipped, and we're checking to see if we are unoccupied. If both of these are true, we can play the attack montage. Now, this is a very long conditional, and it's generally a good idea to refactor these types of things. One way to refactor it is to make a local Boolean variable. So we can say const bool b can attack, and initialize this with this expression in the parentheses. We can say equals action state equals unoccupied, and character state is not equal to unequipped, And then instead of all of this here in the conditional, we can simply check B can attack. And of course, we need that semicolon at the end of this expression. And if we want this to be a little bit easier to read, we can place each of these different conditions on their own line, and this looks a bit better. So that's one way to do it. Another would be to simply make a function that returns a Boolean, and we can call that function here to see if we should attack or not. So to do that, we go to /character and declare a new function. We can put it right here under attack end. It can return bool, and we can call this can attack. Now, bool returning functions should sound like questions, like can attack, and that way it kind of sounds like calling the function is answering that question. So let's go ahead and define can attack. And I'm going to take my function definition, Control X to cut it, and move it up to just under attack. That way we can see the implementation here. And can attack returns a Boolean, right? We're going to return this condition here. I'm going to highlight and copy these lines and replace the false here that Visual Studio gave me by default with this expression. So now we see that can attack will return true if both of these conditions are true. Our action state is unoccupied and our character state is not unequipped. And now here in attack, rather than cluttering this up with our conditional logic, we can remove those lines and instead just call can attack here. And now attack is still nice and neat. So now attack will only allow us to play the attack montage if can attack returns true, which checks both of our enums, action state, making sure we're unoccupied and not attacking, and character state, making sure we're not unequipped, so we have a weapon. So now we can save everything. I went ahead and closed my editor down, and I'm going to Control F5 to compile and launch the editor. And now I can press play and left-click all I want, and I won't attack. But as soon as I pick up a weapon, I can all of a sudden attack, as we're no longer in the unequipped state. And we can't spam the attack button, so this is looking a lot better already. Perfect. Great job. Now our weapon is no longer hovering, and I'd like to show you what happens if we set it back to hover. We can go back to our Blueprints folder, and in Items, Weapons, we can open BP Weapon. And remember, we disconnected Add Actor World Offset from Event Tick. Let's connect that again, and we can play test. And we see that the weapon is now hovering again. But if we hit E to equip it, it's still hovering. So we need a way to know if this weapon has been equipped. That way, we can let it hover before we equip it, and then stop this behavior once it becomes equipped. And we'll handle that in the next lecture. Great job. I'll see you soon.